Now, let's talk about opening move. Best opening move, always starting in the middle. Middle creates the most opportunities. You got the vertical, 2 horizontals, and the diagonals with the most opportunity to create connect 4. Whereas, for example, if you contrast it with the diagonal here, or putting it on the side here, you can only create 1 diagonal with 1 vertical and 1 horizontal. And here you're limiting yourself. This is the best move. A good beginner's strategy that a few people don't actually know about when you start playing is this sneaky move that you can do here. So once you play in the middle, some players will like to play above you to try and stop the vertical uprising. Of course, you can then start off the sneaky move by playing it on the side. Now, most players will look at this, a few players will look at this and go, well, there's no threat here because, well, Connect 4 requires you to have 3 to make a threat and then 4 to win. And so they won't fear this, or they won't bother with this. What they'll do is they'll be a little bit clever. They'll create the 2 of their own to try and match you, and here they've already lost the game. Because if you play next to create the 3, you've actually created 2 open threats, and now they can't block. So if you put the yellow onto here to try and block one side, you win the game. So that's the sneaky move you can try and play on your friends or family. Another good beginning strategy is to try and create the 7 here. Now, in this case, this could be a 7 or the backward 7, reverse 7, it's okay. Creating the 7 here is automatically creating a trap for the player that you're versing. Now, when you create the 7, a few players won't realize that you're actually about to win the game. Now here, it doesn't look like you're about to win the game because you can't actually do anything here. But the yellow player will continue to play on and they'll try and play their moves. But what happens is that as you're playing here and they're threatening to do something else over here, when you make this move, you are now threatening Connect 4. The thing is, it's a trap because as soon as they block you now have the ability to win the game diagonally. So this figure 7, very powerful. Keep seeing if you can try and make this during the game. Another strategy about playing Connect 4 is trying to create as many threats as possible at the very beginning of the game. Here you can see that we're red pieces, we're versing the yellow opponent. Here, there is a move that I would play to try and make a really solid threat. Now, threat just means that you're trying to make a 3 in a row so that the 4th can be played to make the win of the game. Here, there's a really obvious move for me that I would play. I want to see if you can maybe you want to pause the video and see where you would play. Now, the move that I would play here is that I can play this move. And this move is really powerful because you're now creating 2 threats. The yellow player can't go up voluntarily up here. If the yellow plays here, you win here. Yellow plays here, you win here. And you've created a really powerful threat at this point in time. Now, the yellow player should also aim to do the same. And both players should be aiming to do the same, but you're always trying to aim to make 3 in a row as threats. You'll notice that vertical threats aren't as powerful because when you try and create a vertical threat, the other player will just block it automatically. Horizontal threats and diagonal threats are what you're trying to make. Sometimes the verticals are good to make traps. The vertical forces them to play a move, but the other horizontal and the diagonal helps create threats and eventually possibly even traps. Here's the most advanced strategy that I'm going to try and show. With Connect 4, I want you to notice that this is an odd number of columns, but we have even number of rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That actually matters, even number of rows, because if you're playing games and you're playing and you're constantly getting to a stage where you're ending up in a draw where the whole board's being filled and you can't win, or people are just playing and it's getting filled up really, really quickly, the end game is actually really important, and you can set yourself up well for the end game. Now, what I want you to notice is that if we were to play the game, perhaps not even thinking much, just to play, the yellow player will always play about the red player, and the red player will always play the yellow player, you'll see that eventually there is a pattern being made. Now, of course, this would never be a move. This would never be a valid game that's being played. But I want you to see that as you're playing the board, if you get to a point where you get to the end game, as in what I mean by that is you only have one column left. You got everything else filled, but one column left. What do you think who do you think will be here and who do you think will be here? Now here it should be obvious to you that it doesn't really matter. Like we can play the red here now. We can play the red in different position, and perhaps the yellow is going to change his move up, and so we can do this. It doesn't really matter. We can just play in order, and you can see that the pattern's changing a little bit. But as long as we're playing in order, you should be able to see that. Oh, yeah. We keep going. Doesn't matter here. It's still going to be red on the next go. The red's going to be at the bottom. The red's going to be at the bottom. Red's going to be at the bottom. Okay. Of course, if you're playing, if you have multiple columns left, this is not going to be an issue. But when you have one column left, what's going to happen is whoever plays first will always be at the bottom, and whoever plays second will always be on the second, and so on and so forth. Now, why is that important? It's because if you're playing for the end game, you need to be creating threats depending on if you went first or if you went second. So if you're thinking about that and you're starting a game early, you should be thinking as the first player, if you're playing as the first player or the second player, let's say you're the first player, you should be thinking, how do I create a threat early on my specific row that I'm looking for? In this case, it's the first row, but it's also the third row. It's also the fifth row. So as you can see, it's always the odd number for the first player, always the even number for the second player. So here, if I'm going first and I create my middle piece, and yellow's gonna go, and red's gonna go, and yellow's gonna go. Oh, which way? I'm gonna go here. Red's gonna go here. Now, you play your normal game out. Now, you should be thinking in the back of your mind, it's not going to be something that's really, really stuck in forward, really, really always going to be focused on. But you're always thinking, oh, me as the red player or the first player, I'm trying to create opportunities or threats on the odd number rows. So in this case, the yellow has taken this board up here, which is not actually helpful for us because we would really love to have this horizontal threat. Yellow's taken it. It's not a big deal at the moment, but we're gonna just try and create pieces and try and make it work. So we can then, create opportunities as we go. Yellow's gonna play here, red's gonna play here. And you can sort of see that this is not gonna this hasn't really advantaged anybody at the moment. But if you have this yellow, if you have a red piece, for example, if you're creating a diagonal threat, so if you're creating a diagonal threat and it ends here, well, I guess you could sort of simulate what could happen. Let's say that you have this, okay? This is a really good threat. 1, 2, 3, and you're aiming for this because it's on the odd number row. Now, why? Well, let's see, if you play the entire game out, and let's just example that all of these are filled except for this row. Now, let's say you're about to get to a tie game. Of course, player 1 will go first in this final column, okay? Player 2 has to go here because this is the only move left. And now you have won the game because you forced the threat on the odd number. Alternatively, if the second player forces the threat on the even columns, he or she can also win the game. So knowing your odds and your evens, knowing your first or if you're going first or second, is actually a key winning strategy in the advanced games that you start playing if you keep practicing.